Hey everyone, welcome back to So Arizona. It has been about a month since I did my last garden tour, and I wanted to give an update and a tour on how things are going in the garden right now in mid-December. This is a really interesting time, I think, in southern Arizona for gardeners because we've got basically the end of all summer warm season things. I know that sounds crazy to say for those of you who are in colder climates, but we really can grow things up through November and sometimes early December if we don't get a hard frost. So I just harvested some of my pumpkins and have just said goodbye to the last of my tomatoes. So now I consider this solidly wintertime gardening, and I've got a lot of leafy greens and a lot of root vegetables that are in the ground already, and then I'm continuing to plant. But really, this is our cold season. I just harvested the last of my pumpkins. They actually didn't do as well as last year. I only got about 15 pumpkins this year. Last year I got over 50, and I was able to donate them to a local charity in Tucson, which is really nice. But this year, you know, it just wasn't as good. And sometimes things are like that, whether it be rainfall or temperatures or what have you. Certain years are bumper crops and other years not so much. My tomatoes did especially well this year, but my pole beans did not. Last year I got such a great crop. But this year we got an early frost. Early on I was able to cover up quite a few things, but the covers just weren't enough to save those pole beans. They're pretty frost sensitive, so I did not get them. They had a ton of bean pods on them, but they were all very green and the beans had not developed yet. So I had to say goodbye to those. But actually that is one of the things that I'm going to be doing today, is cleaning out all of the bean beds because I need these beds for something else. This bean row is about 28 feet. Earlier in the summer, I had a ton of zinnias that had just come up volunteer along these edges. I've ripped those out already, but I had left the beans in. And as you can see, these beans, they actually still had blooms on them, which is so sad, but they are incredibly crispy, as you can see. My plan this year is actually to grow my tomatoes in this bed. Last year I had grown my tomatoes in this bed and in that bed, but I like to switch things up just for pest prevention. So what I'm going to be doing is ripping out all of these vines today. Underneath this huge mess of bean vines is a cattle panel on T-posts, and this runs all the way down. So this year, to make it easier on myself and to switch up the garden bed situation, I am going to be using that cattle panel trellis that goes all the way down to support my tomatoes. Now, I may still put tomatoes in these two beds, but for now, I'm going to be starting here. It is time to start planting tomato seeds and peppers and eggplants and all those warm season things in the house. All of the seeds need to get started right now. And so if I want to plant out my tomato seeds in February, then I have to get them planted now. One of my jobs for this weekend is starting all of those warm season things. I haven't done that yet. The hardest part of that is deciding which varieties that I want to try, because I always want to try all of them, and it's so hard to make a decision about which ones I'm actually going to be planting and which ones I'm not. And of course I always overplant, but that means that I can share with my daughter and my son. So it works out okay. It gives me a little bit of cushion when it comes to overplanting. But otherwise, let me show you what else is going on in the garden. I'm pretty excited about the garlic this year. This triangle bed is my garlic bed. It may not look so big on camera, but it actually is pretty big. This is the bed that I grew my cowpeas and my corn and my sunflowers in over the summer as a Three Sisters garden. But I have got a big crop of garlic going. On this side, all of this is garlic, and they're really starting to do really well, I think. Really starting to put up a lot of shoots. And then over here, I've got my shallots. So these are all shallots. And I shared, I think, in an Instagram post about this area right here. I don't know if you can see this, but there's garlic on this side and there's shallots on this side, but then there's this gap. You know, sometimes germination problems just happen. These shallots were the same variety as the ones right next to them. I ordered them from the same company, but for whatever reason, they are just not sprouting and doing well at all. So I'm gonna have to investigate why that is. I don't know if I've got maybe some grubs in that area or if there's not enough water coming in from the irrigation line. So I'm not really sure. I'll have to let you know about that. But I've also got in this bed a ton of toy onions, and I've got the Dutch yellow and let's see, the Holland red shallots in this bed. So this is doing really, really well. And all along the sides, there's sides all the way along this whole bed like that. And I've got some calendula and some scabiosa or pincushion flower. Some of those are starting to come up. You can see the little tiny sprouts there. And I've also sown quite a few herbs. I have fennel and I've got dill, and I've also got some other flowers mixed in as well with the scabiosa and the calendula, and that is some nigella for sure, and I actually can't remember which other one, but there's another one in there. So as soon as it peeks its head up, I will let you know, because I don't remember. I'm not always so good at keeping records. In the smaller triangle bed where I had the zucchini and the sunflowers during the summer, I have sown fava beans. And the reason that I'm concentrating a lot on legumes in the big triangle bed that I just showed you where the garlic is, and the smaller triangle bed, is because these were the last beds that we dug and put in last year, and the soil is still not so great. It's pretty sandy, it's pretty rocky and dry, so I'm still trying to add organic matter and really beef up the nutrition in the soil here. So I've been planting a lot of legumes as kind of a ground cover. The cowpeas in the other bed, I just chopped and dropped all of that plant material so that I could amend that soil. So it got left. I harvested the beans, so I got some food from it, a lot of food actually. And then I chopped and dropped all of the plant matter in hopes that it would help enrich the soil. And of course, legumes are nitrogen fixing, and so they will develop nitrogen nodules on their roots. So I definitely made sure to clip them at the soil line and leave those in place. This bed right here, this has my fava beans in it, and these are also legumes, of course, and so they will fix nitrogen too. So they are starting to take off. Now I was noticing that in this area, these are not as big as those. They are the same variety, planted on the same day. I used the same inoculant on them before I planted them. So I'm thinking maybe that is because of the space in between these two irrigation lines. There's an irrigation line here and here, and I'm wondering if maybe it just stays a little bit drier there, and so they are just germinating more slowly. But as I am picking up the soil, it's still really moist, so I am not exactly sure. And then just to explain these cages, we have a resident possum in the backyard, and usually possums don't bother the vegetable material or the crops in the beds. They are after grub worms and beetles and larvae and things like that. So he tends to dig, and when he digs, he's not going for the plants, he's going for those grubs. And when he does that, he accidentally digs up my sprouts and my seedlings, which is really annoying. So I have to put these cages on here just for a little while until he goes somewhere else. Let's talk quickly about these long rows behind me. I had my pumpkin vines in here. This first bed right here was my wild row that I think I went a little crazy on the polyculture with, but lesson learned, plant a little less. But I've got onions right now in here. I also sowed a row of carrots, and I'm getting ready to sow some potatoes in here. So I've got those. I'm cutting them today. I've already chitted them, which means exposing them to light and letting them sprout. I'm going to be cutting those seed potatoes in half, and then I'm going, once they're dry, probably in 3 or 4 days, then I will plant those in this bed. In this bed so far, I have a row of onions right here all the way down. You can just start to see some of those carrots germinating, as well as some of these silly little zinnias. They sprinkle their seeds, and I think they're getting fooled by these daytime temperatures we've been having, and they are germinating, but I think the frost will probably get them before they get too far. I've got onions and carrots all the way down here until the very end. At the very end right here is a big mess, and that was the last bit of my pumpkins. I was giving my pumpkins a little bit more time so that they could finish maturing. I think there were 4 or 5 pumpkins on this vine, and they were taking forever, and I had them covered up with a couple of layers of frost cloth just to protect them, because we did have a couple of really cold nights, and they made it. I finally harvested them last week, and I think they were just done. So now that they're done, I'm going to rip out the rest of this mess of pumpkin vines, and I'm going to finish planting my onions and my carrots and things like that. So that is that row. So we were just right here talking about those pumpkin vines, and those came out and sprawled out all over this wood mulch right here. So I'm going to rip all of those out, like I said. So that's bed number 1, the long bed, and this is the second long bed in the middle, all the way down. So I've got quite a few onion starts that I did all the way down. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I've got 5 rows of those onions. And then this funny little patch right here are some peas. These were volunteer peas, but I really loved this variety. I only grew 1 variety, so I know that they didn't mix with anything else, didn't get cross-pollinated at all. But look at this beautiful bloom. It's like a fuchsia and a kind of a purplish pink color. So beautiful. These are sweet peas. So even though I think this came from the chopped up pea vines that I used as mulch, I must have had a few rogue seeds in there, which I'm not mad about because they are delicious. So that's going to be a bonus plant. Further on down here, I have frozen tomatoes. So as you can see, I don't know if you can see, they still had quite a few fairly sizable tomatoes on there. So I was kind of babying them and waiting for them to get finished. But while we were gone on our Airstream trip, the frost got them. So I can just pull those out with no guilty conscience. I tried. So the rest of this is going to be more cold weather crops like beets. I've got some turnips, I have some parsnips, so I've got a bunch of different things in there, and I want to do a really big bed of lettuce too. You may not be able to see into the shady area back there, so we'll go back there in just a minute. But I've got the large majority of my square beds all cleared out from the summer and fall, and I've got a lot of brassicas. This is a lot of broccoli and cabbages in here, and the same with that one back there way in the shade, as well as this one. And I actually had some calendula that survived the hot summer and decided to rebound, and it has been blooming. I actually saw some bees on it yesterday, which was very sweet that they're still there, and I have some food to offer them. This bed right here, I just did a video on this. This is my 4x4 square foot salad garden, and I did this as an example of being able to grow a salad garden for 1 or 2 people in just 4 feet of space. If you want to check out that video, I will link it right here. I did that on the Mel Bartholomew method. He wrote his book in 1981 on square foot gardening, and you can grow so much food in a tiny little space. So I wanted to make this a salad garden for 1 to 2. My husband and I have been eating a ton of leafy greens out of here. I planted things that could all go right into the bowl together, and then I just re-sow seeds as I harvest. So it has been really productive. This is another bed that has a lot of cauliflower and a lot of broccoli and cabbage, as well as here. So more of those calendula that made it through the summer. And I've got things at different sizes. Let's see if I can get a little closer. So this one is a Romanesco, and then I've got some cauliflower back here. But in the very back, let's go this way, you can see the size difference between this one and that one. And that's because I've been trying to succession plant, which means sowing the seeds a few weeks apart so that you can harvest a few weeks apart and really spread out the harvest and the work so that you can get a steady, consistent source of vegetables from the garden all winter long instead of all at once. I haven't done anything with this one yet. This is full of that Bermuda grass, which I'm gonna have to really work on and dig out, but I just haven't done anything with it yet. I probably am going to clear this out this weekend and plant some beets or turnips or something like that. And then this monster mess right here, oh my goodness, these were the Chiapas wild tomatoes, which got enormous. And they finally got, for the most part, frost killed. So I'll be tearing this bed out too. But you can see it actually sheltered itself. There are some green parts to this vine under here. But I'm gonna go ahead and rip it out because it is just crazy big. It's taken over 2 of my 4x4 foot beds, and I want that space for something else. All right, let's venture forth into the shady areas that we were just talking about. I have some experiments going on here, and I'm excited to share them with you. These are still to be decided whether or not they're successful or not, because I haven't done this particular kind of cover cropping before. So let's talk about that and why it's good and what I'm hoping for. Aren't these cabbages so beautiful? I especially love the purple ones. Like, look at that. I've got quite a few different varieties in here just to mix and match, but I also sowed some cover crop. Now, it's been very cold. This is the coldest corner of the yard. So things can struggle back here. Not cabbage though, it does so well in the cold. But you can see, what is this? Do y'all know? Might be a little hard to see on camera. I can't get super close with this lens. That is Dutch white clover. So I'm experimenting with different kinds of cover crop. One of them is clover. The white clover is a much shorter version than, say, a red crimson clover that people will use sometimes. But I wanted something that would cover the soil, that would retain the moisture, shelter it from the sun, but also fix nitrogen and add organic matter. So I'm gonna let that go. I'll probably let it bloom so that it can encourage pollinators to come in as they're looking for nectar sources in the early spring. But once it goes to flower, I'm not gonna let it seed. I'm actually gonna chop it down, and I'm gonna mix all of that back into my soil gently, probably with like a broad fork or something like that, because I do not wanna disrupt all of those fungal networks and all of the soil biology that is living in my soil. I don't wanna chop through it with a tiller. So I only use the tiller when I'm establishing the beds at first. So we're still back here in the cold zone. That's my monster vegetation pile that I ripped out late this fall. It's drying and waiting to be shredded. That is the cabbage bed we were just at. So now I am at this bed, and this has got a ton of broccoli and cauliflower and cabbages in here. Again, I just love brassicas. I usually will eat a broccoli or a cauliflower or a cabbage every morning for breakfast with my food. So anyway, super healthy. But I've got underneath here, you can see between all of these plants, I've got something else growing. And these are super, super pretty, just little delicate flowers, like little fairy plants, I think. But those are garbanzo beans or chickpeas. I got these from Native Seed Search. I will put the name of the variety up on the screen. So these are going to stay fairly low growing. But these Romanescos and cauliflowers are gonna get probably twice as big. So this is another experiment with a nitrogen fixing legume that I can use as a cover crop just to cover my soil, conserve moisture, and just really add a lot of organic matter and nutrition to the soil. Another thing I love about trying cover crops out is that you get food from them too. So in the summer when it was hot, I was growing cucumbers underneath my eggplants and my peppers. So I was able to harvest cucumbers in the same bed that I was harvesting eggplants and peppers from. So my hope here is that I can harvest broccoli and cauliflower and chickpeas or beans or whatever. So the white clover is more for all of the things that it adds to the soil as well as for the beneficial insects. But these chickpeas, those are for me. Then in this last bed back here in the colder part, I have Brussels sprouts, I've got some collard greens, more cabbages, and more of this clover. This white clover is filling in a lot better on this side than it is on the other side. I think it's because it's a little warmer and a little bit sunnier over here. So if I pan out over there, that area right there gets the shade from this tree. So it is pretty shady over there. Cabbages don't seem to mind though. So this mess is my stock tank garden. If you didn't know before, I am using circular and oval shaped stock tanks. These are great because if you want to do raised beds, you just set them in place and fill them. No construction skills required. And this is not going to break down like wood. These are probably going to be here forever, which is fine with me. Pay once and use them years and years and years. So in this mess are my tomatoes. You can see they still had quite a few cherry tomatoes on them when the frost got them, but honestly, they were not tasting very good as the cool weather came in. So I'm just gonna rip those out. And this next one over here, I've shared before, I've got a mix of all kinds of greens. I have lettuce and bok choy and kale and Swiss chard. I've got some beets and radishes in here. So lots of really good stuff. I've been really enjoying picking these for breakfast and making omelets and things like that. I'll probably be making a kale and white bean soup. I have an Italian recipe that's really good that I make a lot in the winter. I have tents. No, actually, I'm trying to protect my sprouts from birds. So I've got some broccoli rabe in here. I have some arugula in there, and I have a mesclun mix in here. And if I don't cover them while they are sprouting, I will have no sprouts left because the birds will just pick it clean. They love those little sprouts. Let's see. And then in this bed, I have some more bok choy. I've got some radishes, some beautiful Swiss chard, and a little bit of spinach that I just tossed in there kind of half-heartedly. And then lastly, I've got some of these nasturtiums. These are so pretty. You can eat the leaves and the flowers of these. I think there's one little bok choy hiding in there, but for the most part, it's just nasturtiums in here right now. I'm not sure what I'll put in it. This is my last stock tank that I have over here. I've got some other little, like containers that I use sometimes. Right now, it's growing a really good crop of Bermuda grass. Isn't that nice? My nemesis. But I planted some peas in here. This is a 5-foot long stock tank. So I can grow quite a bit here next to this old shed. I've got a little trellis set up here that my husband made out of a cattle panel and some scrap wood for me. Pretty cheap. But I've got some of the seeds that I saved from those peas that I was talking about, those sweet peas. So those are here. Hopefully, as they are ready, they will start taking off and climbing up here. And then right in front of them, I have some turnips. Let me clear these peas away. These are turnips right here, right in front. And then followed by some carrots. I've got a row of carrots there. In the front of here, I've got some lettuce. So that is just getting going. Still looks pretty sad. The garden is probably a lot cleaner than the last time I did a garden tour when it was a huge jungle, a productive jungle, a beautiful jungle, but a jungle nonetheless. So I've cleared a lot of things out. As I mentioned, I've got a huge pile of garden waste and vegetation that I ripped out of these beds that is waiting to dry so that I can put it through my shredder to make mulch. Called Freddy Krueger. Don't forget, that's his name. He is my garden mascot and my, I think, most favorite new toy, besides maybe my seeder that I'm using to seed long rows really easily with some of those small seeds. And I've also got a pile of those old cowpeas that I ripped out. I'm going to be chopping those and using those as mulch too, because I am trying to produce everything that I need for this garden for the most part. I save seeds, I make compost, I'm making my own mulch. So I'm really trying hard to cut out the expenses for things that I have to bring into the garden. So my plan today is to rip out the bean row, the old pumpkin vines, those old tomatoes, and then if I have time, I will sow some seeds. I've got some carrots and some lettuce and some beet seeds that I really need to sow today. If not today, then hopefully over the weekend. I'm also going to be planting the potatoes this weekend, so that is going to be exciting. Potatoes can be a little bit frost sensitive, so I'll probably cover those with a row cover just to make sure that they are all tucked in. It will be a row cover that's thin so that the light can still penetrate it, so that hopefully they will grow really happily under there with the irrigation lines. I have been kind of obsessed with planting a huge salad garden, a lettuce garden. I wanted to combine different kinds of lettuce, the beautiful purple and green, and then the speckled ones. I see these in photos and garden books, and they are just so beautiful. And we eat so much salad. A couple times a day we'll have a bowl of salad, so we use a lot of it. So I really think that that if I plant a ton of it, it will not only be beautiful but also delicious and nutritious too to eat. So that is my plan. It may be a little overly ambitious, but I'm hoping that I can pull it off by this weekend. That is the state of my garden right now. Thank you so much for visiting with me. I'm Kara from Arizona. Until next time, happy gardening.